Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Gretchen, and today I am here with my first official review from this year's Women's Prize for Fiction. And it feels really weird saying that. Normally at this point in time, I would have already had several of these books already finished, but unfortunately, I'm really struggling to get my hands on a lot of these titles this year. My library has a good bit of them, but there are tremendously long holds on most of them, and there are a good bit of books that I'm struggling to even find available in the States yet that would require me to order them from like Blackwell's or Waterstones. And the other thing about that is I promised myself I didn't want to spend a whole lot of money on books for the Women's Prize this year, because the Booker Prize, which they will announce later this year, those books are usually very difficult for me to get in the States, so I often have to put in an order for those, and I want to save my money until then. So unfortunately, that means that I really haven't been able to engage and participate with this year's Women's Prize as much as I would normally do. But the good news is that of the short list, I have completed officially at this point in time 4 of the titles. I had already read the Elizabeth Strout, The Safe Keep, and this past week I finished Good Girl, and I finished all 4s, which I will get to the review here in a minute, about a week and a half ago. And the good news is that yesterday I went to the library and my holds for the Persians and Fundamentally came in. So it's looking good for me to be able to at least complete the short list. So I'll put out single reviews for the shortlisted titles, but as far as the long listed ones that I didn't have a chance to read yet, I will likely still read the ones that I am interested in reading, and then I'll just put those reviews in as part of my regular reading recaps. I haven't done a lot, or I haven't done any reading recaps as of late, because all the books that I have been reading have been for the prizes, so I was doing standalone reviews for them, but I can start to get to those recaps again if I'm only going to be doing standalones for the shortlisted titles. So that's a little bit of a background as to why it's taken me so long to get these Women's Prize for Fiction reviews out there. And I am going to start, like I said, with all 4s. So that's the book we're here to talk about today. Now, I will also say before I talk about the book that if you follow my channel and you saw my wish list for what I wanted to see make it onto the Women's Prize for Fiction long list this year, you will know that All 4s was a book that I did not want to see make it. This was not a book that I wanted to read. This was not a book that I was excited about, because I didn't think that I would get along with it, and I was correct. I will give a review of this book, but I don't really have a whole lot to say, because I feel like this book is going to be very divisive, and there's going to be a camp that really got along with it, and then there's a camp that really disliked it, and I don't want to talk somebody out of reading it, because I don't know your life experience. I don't know if there is going to be something about All 4s that you really relate to, because it could be a really great book. But what I will do is talk about my experience with it briefly and why it didn't work for me, but fully knowing that this could be a book that very much works for you. So All 4s is a book about a woman in her mid-40s. She's 45 at the start of the book, and she is semi-famous, and trust me, she lets us know that several times. And she has a husband and a young child. She lives in Los Angeles, and she does something with the arts. And basically, something that she had worked on in the past is going to be used for some type of, I think, marketing event or art project. And she is going to be paid $20,000. And she is also going to have to travel from LA to New York to promote the art or something or another. Bottom line is she has to make a trip from LA to New York. After talking with her husband, the decision is made that instead of her flying, she is going to take the long way. She is going to take some time for herself, and she is going to drive from LA to New York. And it's going to be a time for her to slow down and reflect on her life and have some quiet time and some, peace and alone time with herself. She's at that age where right around the corner from perimenopause, and there's a lot going on in her life, and she just wants some time for reflection. On the day her trip starts, she gets on the road, and the first thing that she does about 20 miles outside of her home, she goes to a gas station to fill up, and she has a connection with this man. And the next thing you know, she never makes it out of that town, and she ends up finding a motel where she holes herself up in it, and she decides that she is going to stay there. She's going to try to track this man down, and then the next thing you know, she decides that she is going to stay in the hotel. She's going to hire somebody to decorate it with that $20,000 that she was going to be given for her art, and then she basically just decides to stay there, and she's keeping it from her family. Her family still thinks that she's on her way to New York. Her friends still think that she is on her way to New York, but she basically just starts to live in the moment, and she starts self-reflecting, and basically as a reader, we start to see her become a little undone, and she starts reflecting on her life, and she starts exploring her sexuality, and she starts thinking about her marriage and motherhood and all of these things, and the story just kind of takes off from there, and we follow her on this journey of self-discovery. And I will say that this book definitely has an audience. This is going to be a book that I feel if you can at all relate to anything that the narrator has to offer, you're going to enjoy this book much more. Personally, I did not relate to this narrator at all. There was nothing about her story or her journey that I was able to understand, and it really dampened my experience and my enjoyment for the read. Not understanding her headspace or being able to get myself into that, I really struggled with understanding why she was doing the things that she was doing. Parts of this book were engaging and I found them tolerable, but I really struggled with this narrator because she came from a life of privilege, and she started making conscious decisions to basically start to destroy her life. She knew what she was doing. She knew her actions would have consequences, but she threw caution to the wind and she did it anyway. And once those consequences started to appear, she started to question why she was experiencing negative things and consequences from them, and she couldn't understand why her life was then spiraling out of control, and she was basically her own worst enemy. And I really struggle with characters in books that purposely do things assuming that they're not going to see any negativity come out of those decisions, even though they know they're bad. It's almost to me like this character felt like she was immune to consequence, and I kind of attuned that to the level of privilege that she had. I mentioned that she considered herself to be semi-famous, so maybe she thought that the rules didn't apply to her, and she had enough things in her life protecting her from those bad experiences, but I just couldn't connect to any of it, and I really disliked her as a main character. And I think another reason why I really disliked this book is that the main character to this book very much reminded me of the narrator in Creation Lake. Not in the same way, like this wasn't a spy novel, or, well, I mean, to be fair, you really can't call Creation Lake a spy novel either, but whatever. It wasn't the same type of book as far as plot goes, is my point. But the way that the characters acted and the way that they felt that their actions, even though they knew they were doing the wrong thing, they didn't really care. And they just kind of lived in their own little world, and they were very much full of themselves, and it just felt fake to me. It felt like the authors, like Miranda July's writing style also reminded me very much of Rachel Kushner's, where they were purposely trying to be edgy and provocative, and they were trying to shock the readers, but with all of this strange and odd behavior that these women were doing, and it just didn't really sit well with me. And the narrator was privileged. I couldn't find her even remotely relatable, and I'm the same age as the narrator in All Fours, and from what I heard from listening to all the feedback from several women that have read this, that they thought that this was so relatable and they really saw a lot of themselves in the narrator. And I can understand how that's possible. I certainly don't have the same life experience as the narrator. The narrator was married, has children. I'm single, I don't have children, so I really can't understand that part. And perhaps if I were in a position where our lives aligned a little more like that, I could get more out of this. But sadly, I just couldn't relate to anything that this author was saying, and I really didn't enjoy it. It also, to me, felt like she was trying to justify her bad behavior and bad choices on everything else except herself. She blamed it on her perimenopause. She blamed it on society. She blamed things on her husband. She blamed things on the fact that she was a mother, and there was no self-reflection. There was nothing in her mind that would convince her or point her to the decision that maybe she was a part of the problem. It was always somebody else. This book also made me feel very uncomfortable at times, especially with a lot of the strange things that she did as far as her behaviors go. There were several instances where she was having relations with this man. I don't think it's any secret that she's exploring her sexuality on this trip. I think it's actually in the description of the book, but she's, exploring her sexuality, and she's having a moment of infidelity from her husband, and the actions that she is doing with this man are just strange. And they're so strange to the point where I felt like it's another instance where the author, Miranda July, was just purposely trying to be provocative and scandalous and edgy and hip, and it didn't sit well with me. I just can't understand some of the actions. Some of them were actually very gross, and I'm a nurse, and anytime I think about things that are happening in intimate areas of someone's body, and all I can think about are germs and diseases and how unsanitary things are, and it was just very weird. And the other thing is that as she started to kind of come undone, it was almost like a switch flipped in her mind and she went feral. Nothing was off limits, and she just totally lost herself. Like, this hotel room became a void for her, and while she was in this hotel, she was invincible and she didn't have to worry about the outside reality. She could just do whatever she wanted in this room and there would be no consequences. And unfortunately, that's not how life goes. And then that goes back to her, making those decisions and coming out on the other side of that and wondering why her life isn't where she wanted it to be, and why now she has all of these extra added complications into her life because now she has problems to fix because of the decisions that she's made. And I can understand this book having an audience. Like I said, if there are parts of this book that you are able to relate to that narrator, your experience is definitely going to be much better than mine. But because I couldn't do that, I just didn't find this book to be appealing at all. I also, as a true criticism of the book, not just on the subject matter, I didn't find the writing to be that great. I didn't get along with it, and that's okay. There's a book for everybody, and this wasn't my book, and there are definitely going to be readers out there that pick this one up. But as somebody that reviews books, I personally can't recommend it because it's nothing in my wheelhouse. So if any of the things that I talked about sound interesting to you, or if they sound remotely relatable, I could very much see you picking up this book and enjoying it. But if you're someone like me that maybe hasn't experienced any of those types of things, or you're not in the same type of life situation, being single and not having children, this might not be the book for you. I always try to be diplomatic when I read books that I don't get along with, because I understand that I'm probably the minority here. This book is obviously doing something right. It's not only shortlisted for the Women's Prize, it's shortlisted now for the Carol Shields Prize. It was shortlisted or a finalist for the National Book Award. This book is getting a ton of love, but it's just not a book for me. I would say though, if you do start to read this and you're not enjoying it right off the bat, just stop, because the book is not going to get any better for you, I don't think, and you can just move on to the next book because you'll probably end up really frustrated with it. And if this book hadn't been a prize nominated book, I would have DNF'd it. I really try to start whatever I finish whenever it comes to a prize nominated book, but I wish that I would have stopped this one and saved myself the trouble. And as a matter of fact, I kind of knew going in already this was a book I was dreading, and I was right. And I know myself as a reader. I know what I like. I know what I tend to dislike. And I knew going in that this was going to be a book that I would likely not enjoy, so there were no surprises there. But yeah, I can definitely see why it made the short list, because there are so many women that are relating to it, and there's a lot of buzz about it, and I am definitely the minority here, but I'm okay with being the minority. It's just not for me. So yeah, that's my first review from the Women's Prize for Fiction this year. I've actually, I mentioned I read Good Girl. I finished that just a few days ago, so I'll hopefully get a review out for that. I did a review for The Safekeep when it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize last year, so I'm probably not going to do another review of that, but I will link it in this review. And then what's the other one? Oh, the Elizabeth Strout one. That's a book that I had already read previously. I will get a review out for that, and then I actually technically only have 2 more to read, so there will definitely be more content coming from the Women's Prize for Fiction. And until we read again, bye!